Welcome back to our channel, MotoMouths Uganda. Once again, we are here with Engineer Ivan Chiguli, who is going to take us through another interesting segment on electric vehicles. Just before, we talked about hybrid cars, and there's no other way to end this than with electric vehicles, which have also become quite popular around the world. They are starting to make inroads around here. And so it is important to know what they are all about, how they operate, their advantages, the disadvantages, and what they generally mean for the industry as a whole. You're welcome, Engineer Ivan.
Yes, good afternoon, Alan. Thank you very much for your brief introduction. As usual, we shall not waste time. We shall just go to the presentation I prepared for this. Hoping you can see it now.
Yes, I can see it.
Yes, so we are going to discuss automotive electric powertrains today. In an internal combustion engine, burning releases the potential chemical energy in the fuel. That's how you get this potential energy turns into heat, air expands, there's a big bang, and so this causes, this is how you get rotary motion, which is now transferred through the gearbox and various parts of the drivetrain to the wheels, and you get propelled forward. So this is true for diesel engines and gasoline engines. So the entire engine requires hundreds of precisely crafted moving parts. This makes the engine heavy and expensive. Since all the heat and explosions cause a lot of wear and tear, you need a lot of maintenance. And even then, the engine still wears down. Eventually, it goes kaput. So the heat engine also wastes a lot of energy in heat, sound, and friction. The chemical energy contained in the fuel, the majority of, or most of that energy is lost. The most efficient petrol engines are approaching 30%. The most efficient diesel engines are in the late 30, like 37, 38%. They have pushed the technology after 120 or 30 years. That is the closest we've got to improving efficiency. Now, as you see, electric motors on the other side, on the other end, operate at almost 100% efficiency. Almost all the energy that is pushed in is converted into motion. So in an electric motor, it all works completely different from an internal combustion engine. The advantages are numerous, which include that the electric cars have one moving part, which is the rotor. Inside the motor is a part called the rotor. It is the one which rotates. Therefore, it can be relatively light, compact, and inexpensive. In fact, for most of the electric cars, the most expensive part is the battery, where you store the energy, not the motors and what. They cost some money, but they are nowhere near the cost of the battery. And since magnetic fields are gentle, an electric motor can last essentially forever without any maintenance. The energy efficiency of the motor can be close to 100%. And you can get some of this lost energy back, not lost, some of this energy back when braking. Because of this, because the electric vehicles have regenerative braking. So because of this, the average electric car is 4 or more times more efficient than the average conventional car with an internal combustion engine. That is one reason why in practice, electric vehicles can accelerate much faster than internal combustion engine. Alan, have you seen the videos of the Cybertruck, the Tesla Cybertruck?
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen the videos.
Yeah, so they are trying to challenge it, but obviously it looks quite obvious that it's unbeatable by internal combustion engines or vehicles with internal combustion engines. There is a very good reason and science behind that. For health and climate consideration, the biggest advantage is clear. An electric vehicle can run on renewable energy, and the motor itself has zero emissions. Imagine you are living in a house where you even have solar power systems. So a good, well-sized solar power system can charge your vehicle at night or during the day when you don't drive the vehicle. And you can drive all year round without spending a penny on your car or anything like that. Of course, there are issues to do with when you follow the life cycle of the battery that are used in electric cars. There are issues with the pollution related to the manufacture and disposal of batteries, but we may skip that for now. We are just trying to look at the technical end of things. You will have you have here an image. We have an image of an internal combustion engine drivetrain as it compares to an electric drivetrain. On the left, you have the internal combustion engine at the front, in between the front wheels, with exhaust piping and a fuel tank in the back. If you look at the size of the fuel tank and you compare it to the image on the right, which is of an electric vehicle, and you compare the size of the fuel tank on the ICE vehicle with the size of the battery on the electric vehicle, you see that the electric vehicle, most of its space at the bottom between the wheels is taken up by the battery. And these batteries are not light, they are heavy. In fact, this is the biggest challenge with the electric vehicles. The weight of the batteries is one of the biggest issues, the size. So for now, it would look like in terms of space, the ICE is still leading because you have a small tank which can get you, several hundred miles of range compared to an electric vehicle with a heavy battery which can get you a few hundred miles of range. But even this is being pushed back. There are newer batteries now. I think there is a record. I think there is a record of an electric vehicle, if I remember correctly. I don't know if it is the Mercedes, is it EQS or EOS, which can do over 1,000 kilometers, I think, on one charge. So even the guys making electric vehicles are pushing the technology. They are advancing in technology. So very soon, all the advantages, the only advantage left with the ICE will be lost if it hasn't yet. I haven't been looking out for those records recently, but I know there is a Mercedes which held a record at one point a few years ago for the longest range on one charge. Now, this is a discussion I was having in the previous slide. When you look at motors, the electric engine has the upper hand, clearly. But if you look at energy storage, the heat engine has the upper hand for now, but that advantage is slim if it is still there. My suspicion is in the next few years, we are going to see vehicles with a longer range, but smaller batteries. So batteries compare poorly to in the visual comparison that I've just made in the two storage methods shown here. Full electric vehicles ditch the internal combustion engines completely and run entirely on electricity and only use the electric motor with all its advantages. One of the interesting things in terms of driving is that one pedal driving is common. Alan, you know those toy cars we buy, those rechargeable toy cars we buy for kids? They normally have one pedal. So the child presses on the pedal, the vehicle moves forward. They take the foot off, the thing breaks. So electric cars, many electric cars are also operating like that. They do have a brake pedal as well, but it is rarely used. It's only used mostly in emergencies. So I don't know, people who will be driving cars in 20, 30 years from now, they will be doing next to nothing, where you even have only one pedal. In fact, by that time, even AI may have taken over, where the vehicle can even read your mind and by its own accelerate or reduce speed. We are not yet there, but we could even see things like that in the future. But for now, at least we have one pedal driving being a possibility and becoming common in electric cars. And of course, when you brake, this has the advantage of regenerating energy. We talked about regenerative braking in a previous video about hybrid cars. If you haven't watched that, please go back and watch it. So we have a typical EV system layout where you have the electrical controllers in the front, converters, whatnots, and then you have a low voltage battery here for, the hybrid powertrain uses high voltage, 200, 300 volts, very high voltage, and it's quite dangerous to work on. So other systems on the vehicle, like windows, the instrument cluster, the lights, they use low voltage 12-volt systems. Some are now, like on Teslas, using 16-volt systems, but all those whatnots are here. And then you have the battery pack here. That's a typical EV system layout. And there are a number of configurations. There are a few configurations. For purposes of simplicity, the battery is not included here, but you have a controller here which would send instructions to the power converter to take power from the battery, current from the battery, push it to the motor, drive the motor through a transmission on one axle, pull the vehicle forward, or push it if it's a rear wheel drive. That is a single motor configuration. Now, there is also dual motor configuration. Here is where you start to see the possibility of four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. So it is the same thing duplicated, except that in this case, you have two motors, one for each axle. And you also have now in-wheel configuration where you have four motors, one on each corner of the vehicle. So you can have complex drivetrains like this. I'm not sure, but I think the Cybertruck probably has a system like this, where you have a motor in each wheel. The battery is usually one, but the power is distributed to each motor, and computers ensure that the right power is sent to each wheel at the right time. When it needs all the wheels to push or rotate with the same power, it will give them exactly that. And it monitors to see that that's what they are doing. When it wants only one or two wheels, or for whatever reason, only three wheels to propel the vehicle, it will command exactly that, depending on the logic that has been programmed into the controller. So at the process control and automation engineers, we comprehensively test EV, HEV, and PHEV. HEV is hybrid electric vehicles. PHEV is plug-in hybrid electric batteries. So we can test these batteries and the modules. We've come to the end of this presentation, but we are going to have a second presentation where I'll be focusing on the batteries used in electric vehicles and also hybrid vehicles. I have just, in this video, I've dwelt mostly on the powertrain. In the other video, I'll be discussing mostly the source of power for the powertrain. Alana, I don't know if you have any questions or comments on this.
The topic, like I said, is quite interesting. So obviously there are some comments. One, I am impressed by that statistic of the car doing 1,000 kilometers. I'm thinking that is able for one to go to probably the farthest village to go and come back, because most people, when they hear electric cars, their first fear is, what if I go to Chisoro and there is no electricity?
Yes.
But now if the car can do 1,000, it means that person can go and come back.
Yes, possible.
Is,
At least
the
they
other
can
one,
come back as far as Masaka, because the 1,000 may be an ideal situation where they were doing mostly highway. You know, Mercedes are made in Germany, where you have the Autobahn. In Uganda, you may have messed up traffic. Like you always have humps everywhere, all the way to Chisoro, you may go over 1,000 humps. So that may kill a bit of the efficiency. But at least if it managed 1,000 kilometers, and I'm sure Germany also has hilly areas. So yeah, you may at least maybe get at least 800 kilometers in Kampala. And it also depends on how you load it up. If you put the entire family and the wardrobe, you are going to kill a bit of that range some. But the general thing is this. But of course, even internal combustion engines suffer the same. When you load them up or when you drive them in hilly areas, you also lose range. So yeah, see, like you said, these things are beginning to become quite impressive. So yeah, the electric cars are beginning to roll back the disadvantages they have about range. You can continue. You said you had more comments?
Yes. The other comment is about the storage space. I have not confirmed, but I have heard that for most electric vehicles, where you used to have the engine,
yes,
the internal combustion engines, now that space is almost empty, and someone can put their bags at the front of the car.
Yes, it is true.
When I think about that, I imagine our security officers who are so used to telling you to open the boot.
When you are entering a mall,
Yes, when you are entering a shopping mall or a hotel. So they may tell you to open the boot, yet whatever they are looking for is actually at the front.
Yes, that is an interesting thing to think about.
Their training. Then the other comments on our roads. We have many examples of electric cars. I have seen the Nissan Leaf being advertised by Nissan Motors. I don't know if anyone is driving a Tesla around here. Then there are so many Chinese models that people are anxious to get their hands on because they are relatively cheaper than the Teslas. But then the most burning question I have, which I think all our viewers have, is this thing that Uganda is making electric buses at Chira, the Chira EV cars. You know, the trust levels we have for our government are so low that people keep saying, are they really electric cars? Are they just taking our money or but fairer? So
Mm.
please comment those observations.
Okay, I've already uh, responded to the one about range in a broad way. I haven't driven an electric car myself. I've come across them. Um, I've I've not driven an electric car myself, but I have been in a passenger in one. Um, this was a Nissan Leaf 2012 or 2013 model. we have we have a number of them on the roads here, even in the bonded warehouses. They are there for sale. If you want, you can go and look. Even on Gigi, if you look, you'll find a few. Um, so they are becoming common. The issue with the earlier Nissan Leaf is the range, because my discussion with the owner of the one that I took a lift in, he has not tested it to the limit, but it claims when it is fully charged, it claims on the dashboard that it will give him 90 kilometers. He has never risked to prove that beyond 90 kilometers it will stop. So he normally drives it a few miles into town, goes to work, and then commutes back home. In traffic, it's not a big deal. Electric cars, and they don't consume anything more than they should. In fact, for them, I think they don't have a lot of. They are more, internal combustion engines are more efficient on highways than in town driving. Electric cars do the opposite. They are more efficient in town driving than highway driving. On highway driving, they are affected a lot by wind resistance. The higher the speed they drive at, the wind resistance wastes a lot of their energy. But in town driving, where speeds are low, they are quite efficient because they don't meet a lot of wind resistance. Even if they crawl at 5 kilometers an hour. The motor is only outputting enough power to give you the 5 kilometers an hour, nothing more. At higher speeds of 100 kilometers an hour, the motor will need to keep up with maintaining that speed, or accelerating to that speed, and at the same time fight the air resistance. So it burns up a lot of energy, is wasted that way. So electric cars in traffic, not a problem. The only thing the driver will be annoyed about is the time he's wasting in the traffic. He will not be worried about the fuel, the juice. So yes, the thing about range is the Nissan Leaf, for example, I think has a higher range up to 300 kilometers. The other ones, 2012, 2013, maybe you got 100. They claim maybe 120 or something. I think they can give you 80, 90. If you are commuting to town say if you live in Gayaza, like not deep Gayaza, but near the highway, and you are commuting to town every day, to the center of town, and that's all you are using the vehicle for, I think it's a no-brainer, especially if you calculate how much it costs to charge up the vehicle overnight. But now comes in the element of, if you come back, try to charge the vehicle, and umeme has done its thing, and you don't have power overnight. It means the next morning you are likely to take a taxi. That is now a problem. But if you have a solar system that can accommodate charging an electric vehicle like a Nissan Leaf, you are good to go. Yeah, so yeah, in terms of range, yeah, they are improving. The older ones, of course, had a lower range. But again, when you think about, for example, on a day, if you live in Gayaza and you have someone to pick from the airport in Entebbe, after work. Do you see the conundrum you have now? If this battery is going to give you a range of 90 kilometers, Gayaza to town is maybe 20 to 22 kilometers. After work, you need to do like 45 kilometers to Entebbe airport to pick this passenger. Your vehicle is still running. The problem is when you are coming back to get to Gayaza, because 22 plus the 45, you have already used up like 67 kilometers. By the time you get to Entebbe, you have like 20 kilometers left. So do you stop in Kajansi at a friend's place and stay the night? Charging, you see the challenge with the electric cars which have a small range. But again, if you have one like Teslas, typically have above 300 kilometers in range, that's not a problem. In fact, I think you can go to Masaka and come back without issues, as long as you are not bakwita enaku zino bakwita kuteekawo ku line. Ndaba ku TikTok abaana bakwita kuteekawo line where they are racing cars. They call it kuteeka muntu ku line. When you overtake someone, oba omulabisizza mbu oba omutadde ku line. If you don't get into such petty driving habits, I think you can go to Masaka and come back on a good day. I think, if you're going to operate things like air conditioning, that takes a bit of power because air conditioning runs off the battery. Everything on the vehicle runs off that battery. Even the low voltage battery takes power. It is essentially charged by the bigger battery. So that is an issue. But I think when you have a vehicle that can give you 300 kilometer range, for most people, that's all you need. It's equivalent to having a full tank of fuel in a small, normal internal combustion engine car. And now you talked about front storage. It is true, especially the bigger the car is. On the earlier Nissan Leaf, in which I sat, the boot was in the back. The front was mostly the drivetrain, but you could see there was a lot of space. There was a lot of space in the what you would call the engine bay. There was a lot of free space in there. But on Teslas and other bigger electric cars, yes, you have a portion of the front. It has like a bin which can fit like a small suitcase and a few other items. But most of the storage would be in the back, regardless. But again, even for internal combustion engines, we had some vehicles where the storage was in the front. The sports cars, what the real sports cars, you forget the cars people in Kampala call sport, the Subarus, which they fit with the loud exhaust and they call them sport. Proper sports cars, usually their luggage storage is in the front because they usually have they are called mid-engined. Usually the engine is behind the driver, and usually they are two-seater. So Porsche, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, most of them, the storage is actually in the front. And even then, that storage is not that much because the front, some of it is used for the footwell. That's where the feet and the steering assembly for the vehicle are. But because the engine is in the back, it takes up a lot of the space in the back, so you don't have a boot there. And inside is a two-seater. So it can accommodate like a small suitcase in the front, under the bonnet. Yeah, so the majority of proper sports cars are like that. So it's not a completely strange thing, except that in Uganda, we don't have Ferraris and Porsches, driving around. We have some Porsche Cayennes, those are SUVs, and they look like normal vehicles. And they operate like normal vehicles. The engine in front, storage in the back. Yeah, so sorry?
I think the old VW
Beetle.
the Chikere.
Yeah,
The
because
Beetle.
because the engine was in the back, it also had storage in the front. Yeah,
Yes.
you are right. And then there are some, you are asking about examples of electric cars. We don't have many here apart from the Nissan Leaf. And I think there's even a Nissan SUV model. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember as if they have an SUV model that's electric. And then there are some Chinese ones. I haven't seen many of them here, but I saw somebody with a BMW i8. I've seen some pictures, not on the road, but I've seen some pictures of one or two Teslas in Kampala. But elsewhere in the world, in developed countries, they are quite common. In the US, very common. Europe, very common. In Dubai, I even saw a Tesla, I think it was a Tesla 3 taxi. Yeah, it was a well-labeled taxi, blah, blah, blah. I saw it at the beachfront, moving around. We're getting off a bus and this thing passes us. I saw a lot of Teslas in Dubai, by the way. Somebody would think those guys have cheap fuel, but I saw a lot of Teslas on the road. The last time I was there, about a year ago. Yeah, and then Uganda making electric cars and buses. I think they are making them, but we don't see a lot of them on the roads because I think most of what they have are prototypes. I'm not sure if they have gone into large-scale production. But in any case, I think they've sent some of the electric buses to government entities. For example, at the airport in Entebbe. I think I've spotted one or two buses being used to shuttle passengers between the terminal building and the planes. I travel frequently through the airport. I've not yet had an opportunity to be shuttled around in those electric buses. But I've seen a few on the road, even in Kampala. Usually they are, I think they are government or parastatal owned, something like that. So I think they are making them, but they are still going through a lot of research to work out which powertrains work best here, because there are some issues with the batteries. Batteries don't like hot environments. They also don't like cold environments either. So maybe that's something they are having to deal with in temperate countries. I think most of the time the batteries at the ideal can be maintained at the ideal temperature, although the majority of electric cars have cooling systems for the batteries. So when it is too warm, there's actually part of the air conditioning cools the battery down. And when it is too cold, it does the reverse. It heats the battery up some. So the fact that they are taking power away from the battery to keep it at the right temperature shows you the importance of keeping the battery at the right temperature. Temperature is an important thing. It could be something that these guys at Chira Motors are struggling with because we are in a tropical environment. So maybe that's why we've not seen many cars of theirs on the road. But I cannot claim to have got near one or into one. All I have seen is just like you, what I've read in the media or what I've seen in videos. Maybe one day I'll get an opportunity to come across one or to visit the factory and I'll give you better facts. But at least on paper, they appear to be designing and making electric vehicles. Yeah, that is the best I can say. I cannot claim to have more knowledge. I know they now branched into diesel, so they are making more buses that are running on diesel engines. I'm not even sure whether they are hybrid. 100% electric, not so many on the road. The few that I see being driven are mostly Nissan Leafs, new and older ones. I've seen a BMW i8 on the road, and also in pictures, I've seen some Teslas too, I think. So I will not claim to have a lot of knowledge or experience with and you know, the other thing to think about this, have you noticed there are a lot of electric borders? We are ignoring those. But the border guys have really taken off with those things, especially because it seems the marketing strategy those guys came with, most of us are worried about batteries. When we talk about electric and the hybrid cars, we worry about batteries. So those guys who are supplying or making or importing those electric bikes, what they have done is they sell you the bike. The battery remains theirs. Instead of you worrying about charging that battery, worrying about when the battery will fail, so you ride your bicycle. Once the battery reaches a certain level, it has an app. They give you an app on the phone. It informs you of the nearest battery swapping station. So you go there, you swap a battery, I understand, for less than 10,000 shillings, which is like $2 or $3 only. And you swap the battery out and get a fully charged battery, which gives you, border borders I've talked to claim they get 60, 70 kilometers out of them. So you can imagine 10K, umutwalo gumu, equivalent for 70 kilometers. I think it's okay compared to internal combustion engine. And they take away the worry about batteries, about charging and about owning the batteries. So that's the model they are using for now. And I think that's why you are seeing many, many more electric borders now. When I walk Kampala streets now, I hear, you know, the bike makes a unique, an electric bike or car makes a unique sound. Yeah, so I'm seeing the border borders taking on electric mobility very, very much better than, so much better than the rest of us who are nervous. I think it comes down to the cost of ownership. I think whoever is selling those electric bikes has brought the cost of ownership within the range where it's quite affordable for these guys. And they are loving them. I see them, these guys who ferry food around, Rio border passenger transportation. I see them a lot, more and more in the last 6 months. It's becoming like a craze. If you stand by Ginger Road in the middle of the day for 5 minutes, I'm sure you are going to see one or two of those bikes passing by. If you're observant.
I actually see them. I think there is a company called Spyro.
Yeah.
Which
yeah, there are 2 or 3 more companies actually. I came across some literature which showed there are actually more than one companies. But their model seems to be the same. Their model of business and vehicle ownership seems to be the same. They sell you the bike, and the bikes are not that expensive compared to the internal combustion motorcycles. They're about 3-4 million, and then the battery is theirs. So you run out of battery. That way they can even track the health of the batteries. They can track which battery is on which bike. They know. Because the batteries themselves are smart. I believe they have smart lithium-ion batteries with the battery management systems embedded.
I've actually used one, and they had to swap the battery from somewhere around Boyogere.
Yeah, and how long did it take?
The man said, please excuse me as I swap the battery. So he drove into some place. They removed the one which was there, put another one.
And you continued?
Continued.
Yes, very good. Yeah, so unfortunately, we've run out of time. Our next video is going to be about the batteries. So I think that's where we shall continue this conversation. Thank you very much.
Welcome.